Hey, everybody, it's your friend James Shaw. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm excited to be with you. We're doing what we like to do, which is talking to agents that are absolutely nailing it. They're doing things at a high level. You know, we have so much opportunity in a market like this, even a market that's down year over year for the second year in a row. People still move, people still buy, people still sell. Why? Because life events happen. And we're going to talk about one of those life events, and we've got an expert to walk us through it. Hi, Bridget. How are you?
Hi, James. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here. Would you take a minute, introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you are, and a little bit about your business?
Thank you. I am Bridget Potterton. I am a broker in San Diego with Keller Williams San Diego Metro. I've been with Keller Williams for 14 years and I've been in this industry for, I can't believe it, but 20 years now.
That is amazing. You know, I've been around Keller Williams about the same amount of time. So I joined in '05. You joined shortly thereafter. So we've seen the company come a long way in the time we've been here.
Oh, yes, it has grown and lots of exciting things happening.
You had a great business last year. You're a solo agent, did about 21 million. Now in San Diego, that could be like 3 houses, but no, it's not. I know you do significant amount of business, and I'm thankful for it. And one thing we always talk about is kind of go find your niche, right? People buy and sell because of life events. One of those life events that causes people to sell and buy can be divorce. It's a challenging time. It's something that a lot of people experience in this country and around the world, and they need a trusted, partner to walk them through it. That's where you've chosen to specialize. How did you make that decision?
You know, my first divorce escrow was about maybe 17 years ago. And it was so traumatizing, not only to I was representing the buyers. They were buying a beautiful place in La Jolla. Ironically, they were newlyweds, very in love. And we were in escrow on a place where the sellers were in a nasty, nasty divorce. And it was so traumatizing to both all the agents, everybody involved, that I vowed to never do another divorce escrow again. And ironically, the joke's on me. One of my clients about 14 years ago used to do mediations for family law cases, and she started referring me her clients, and I sort of hesitantly agreed. At the time, there wasn't a lot of great education out there. I couldn't figure out, how do I treat these differently from my traditional sales? And it was the blind leading the blind. I mean, there just wasn't great education, and I had to kind of fumble my way through it for a long time.
Yeah, no doubt. And yet you decided at some point to go get some type of designation
Mhm.
so that you could specialize, because it comes with different things. Part of it, I imagine, is there can be just some emotion around it, and you can get a little people maybe some wound up from time to time, and a lot of energy around decision making. So it almost feels like, I don't know, you're like counseling them through this process as well. So getting trained in this was part of your process, right?
Absolutely. So my first designation I got was about 10 years ago, a real estate divorce specialist, kind of more your run of the mill typical designation. And then about 3 years ago, I got designated as a certified divorce real estate expert, which was an absolute game changer for me. One of the challenges that we have is it's not just the emotional piece. You are dealing with two different legal pieces. You have the family law rules, and then you have the real estate laws. And we do not always play well in the sandbox together. And sometimes what happens in a court order may not actually work out in real estate law. So it's figuring out, how do I be an expert? How am I going to be a professional to the family law attorneys who are out there who need somebody like me who can bridge that gap for them?
Yeah, it seems like you definitely need some kind of training. Would you give me an example of kind of what the process might look like? My guess would be most of your business is referral. So a couple has decided they're going to get divorced. They go to their attorney. Part of what they need to do in order to make this work is sell a home. You probably get a lot of business from, a handful of divorce attorneys that you're in some type of referral relationship. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, I've built relationships with family law attorneys here in San Diego, and sometimes it's an interesting niche because the way that you go about the business is very different. I build the relationship with the attorneys, and then what happens is oftentimes I get an email saying, Bridget Potterton, you have been instructed to list this property at 123 Main Street. This is before I've even talked about commission anything about the property.
And this is coming from the court.
Yes,
As part of this process, the court, and they've said this in the House, the court is actually assigning you as the agent.
yes, and that I think has become a little bit more common recently. That's one thing as CDREs that we are working harder to do. There should always be a realtor named in these transactions, especially if they're higher conflict. Sometimes with the mediations, they do something called a marital settlement agreement or something like that. But don't get me wrong, mediations can be just as high conflict as litigations. I learned that the hard way with a couple of transactions. But when your name is put in there, it gives you more ability and more teeth to be able to work your clients through that piece. I am also trained as a third party neutral. So, for example, if you have one party on title here in California, we would never have the other party sign anything unless maybe at the end, one little document right before closing. So one spouse doesn't have to be involved at all. And can you imagine how they're going to feel and how their attorney is going to feel when I've been assigned to do it? So the process is really just working with the parties and helping them understand what the real estate laws are and how would that work with the court order. And the other piece that's really been a huge piece for me to really understand is family law attorneys, they need us.
Yeah.
We as real estate professionals have so much value to give them that we cannot be afraid to share, hey, thank you so much for this court order. Here's a couple things that might not work. Let's talk about how we can work together to get this to happen. I think for me, there was this intimidation of, I don't want to tell an attorney that this isn't normal. And I think just building that confidence over time and building relationships with attorneys enough to say, I am a fellow family law professional, not your typical. I think as realtors, we don't necessarily think of ourselves as professionals in that way, but we absolutely are, and they absolutely need us.
It makes sense. The attorney has their lane of expertise, you have yours, you're counting on each other to help. It also seems like that the first place where you need to add value is to the referral source. So this would be your family law attorneys in your community. What are some ways that you've built relationships with family law attorneys that have helped you earn the business, that at some point the judge or the magistrate is saying, this is who's listing the house. I'm ordering it. It's part of the deal. So, and yet that comes because the attorney's probably saying, hey, we think Bridget needs to be the one. Tell me about how you're building relationship with these family law attorneys to earn the business.
Great question. Well, I did it all wrong at first. And I was sending them the typical things I was sending, my past clients. You definitely don't want to do that. You want to build relationships by adding so much value that they cannot see themselves referring any other real estate professional other than you. And there's a couple different ways to do it. The first thing to do is to learn their language, understand what the difference is between a pro per and a represented client and what all their legal jargon is. They have a lot of the same legal jargon, the same way we have our real estate jargon that they don't understand. So learn how to speak their language. That's step one. Number two, add a lot of value through education. So I provide continuing education classes to attorneys 10 times throughout the year that are on Zoom. And then I also became the first broker that I'm aware of in my area to be approved through the State Bar Association to give CLEs in attorneys' offices. So I go in and I do a lunch and learn. I bring them lunch and they get a CLE credit and they get to learn about me and how I can help them with their cases. So it's really become a win-win. And I know that there's not a lot of other realtors out there doing that. And so it's a space where I know I can really stand out to provide so much value that they think I cannot refer anybody but Bridget Potterton when I need somebody to help me with the case.
Oh, Bridget, this is so great. And again, what you're teaching us can be applied to any niche that somebody wants to work. We've always said, look, the way you earn business is you are consistent in your communication, and your communication is of value. So you're not sporadic in connecting with people, you're consistent in it. And whatever you do for somebody is of value to them, not necessarily value to you. And that's how you earn the business. And I feel like a family law attorney has enough going on. They don't need a real estate agent to screw this thing up. They need somebody who they can trust that can get it through. So that's great. All right. The results have been huge for you, yes?
It's an interesting process. This is not one of those niches where you're going to jump in and get 10 listings all at once, or at least that hasn't been my experience. It's definitely been a slow process. And now that I'm entering in year 3, I'm seeing that shift that I've been kind of waiting for, where attorneys, when I go to family law events, when I go to the bar association events, they know me, they talk to me, and they say, "Hey, Bridget, I just put your name down on a case." One of the challenges I think with this niche, I guess you could look at it as a positive or negative. The positive is sometimes you just, here, go take this listing. Like I got one of those yesterday. And that's a pretty darn good feeling. The downside is sometimes your pipeline doesn't look all that clean because you don't necessarily get a heads up from the attorneys in advance. If I see them at a bar event, they say, "Yeah, oh, hey, Bridget, I just put your name down for a case." And I might get that in a couple of months. Sometimes it's a couple of years. So it's an interesting niche from that space, but certainly the growth has been really exciting. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of this year and next year pan out.
Is that a lesson for someone that's looking to grow a niche? Is that this is a time on task over time for a long time? Is that something you'd tell somebody, whether it's doing what you're doing or any other kind of niche?
Yeah, I know we have a lot of agents within our company that specialize in probate and things like that. And I think a lot of what I've shared today can be transferred over to things like that. I do think it can take a while. It takes a while to build relationships with people. They need to be able to know, like, and trust you before they get to that point. I think attorneys, especially, they're concerned about liability. So they really want to make sure they sort of put you through the ringer a little bit before they just start sending you business.
You got to prove yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, it's good stuff. All right. So then this is allowing you to build database. And I think you told me beforehand, you don't often represent someone on the sale and the purchase. And yet I imagine you may from time to time. You certainly, though, probably get referrals or business down the road from some, because I imagine there are some that are actually very thankful. And now I'm not talking about the family law attorney now. Now I'm talking about this couple that's going through divorce. I imagine some are thankful that you made at least this part of the process as easy as possible. Would that be true?
Yes, you brought up a really good point. My experiences have been one or the other. You have somebody who has gone through such a horrific, painful part of their life, and you are a piece of that, whether or not you're ready to acknowledge it. And so for some of them, even though they are grateful to you, they may not want to hear from you anymore. And then you have some that just think you saved their life, and they want to keep in touch. And that's okay either way. You need to meet clients where they're at and realize that it's not about Bridget. It's not about me. It's about them and their needs. And then with regards to being able to do multiple transactions with them. So absolutely. As a certified divorce real estate expert, I actually took an oath of neutrality, which means that if both parties are going to be buying a house while we're helping them sell the house, yes, I can help both parties to purchase. But if one party is going to be purchasing and maybe the other one's going to be renting or doing something else, I typically would probably not represent one party, because then it's really hard for me to maintain neutrality, which is the number one goal in these transactions as a certified divorce real estate expert.
I imagine that's something you share in your presentation with the seller. I mean, having this designation seems to be of great value, not only to you and now the attorney, the family law attorney trusts you, but you can sit in front of that buyer and seller. I don't know if you're together, probably sometimes you are and sometimes you aren't, but you can sit with them and go, my oath that I took was to remain neutral and represent, the transaction at the best level that I can. Is that something that's part of your presentation?
Absolutely, it is. And I think it is important because as real estate professionals, we are not only allowed, but we are encouraged to double end transactions, right? That's not uncommon. And then also to represent parties when they buy and sell. And so, as a certified divorce real estate expert, when you have an oath of neutrality, you need to be careful with exactly how you're going to handle things. Technically, one of the biggest shockers for a lot of people is, and with family law attorneys, I tell them, as a realtor, not only will I be representing both parties, but I could represent the buyer buying your client's home. Can you imagine how difficult that is? I mean, all it's totally legal. We can do it. But personally, I think there's a lot of ethical issues with that. How can you properly represent two parties that don't get along with the sale of the house and represent a buyer who has completely different goals? And so I also bring that up, and attorneys love that because they know that as realtors we are allowed to double end deals.
It's really great. This is so educational. A couple of more things before we wrap up. One is you probably get asked from time to time to maybe do some pre-work for an attorney, and that's some stuff you can charge for, right?
Absolutely. And that was something that was really hard for me to wrap my head around because I know as realtors, we are sort of taught to just give information and give value. And while I believe in that, um, we you need to know what your value is. You need to know what your hourly rate should be, and that's what you should be charging if you're going to be doing a fair market value. Something else unique that I am trained to do is to be an expert witness, so I can go into court and testify if I need to regarding a case that I'm involved in, or regarding maybe a case I'm not involved in. And that's something that attorneys find value in as well.
Yeah, that's really good. So what advice would you give to somebody that's considering this as a niche to build their business? What's based on your experience, 3 years of doing it, what would you tell them?
Number one, get educated. It is so important to learn the background of whatever space you're, even if whether it's probate or divorce or something else. Get educated, go out there. There are classes out there. For me, becoming a certified divorce real estate expert was a complete game changer. It was like unlike any class I have ever taken before. And I've taken a lot of great classes. And I think that once you're educated, you will find the confidence to be able to pursue the space that you want to pursue. I mean, attorneys can be a little bit intimidating, but I'm actually not intimidated by them at all anymore. It took a while, but I enjoy meeting new attorneys. I enjoy teaching classes to them. I enjoy being the expert for them to come to. It's actually a lot of fun.
Oh, it's great. And another thing you said is be clear and concise with them. They're charging your sellers to do the work. One pro tip I saw you mentioned was you don't send the listing agreement to them because there's no reason really for them to read or to look at it, and yet your client's going to end up having to pay for the time the attorney took to review. So be clear and concise, build relationships, add value. Bridget, you're doing great stuff. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today. Thanks for sharing. And I would just say thank you for helping people at a time that they need some help. And again, I imagine you've seen some fascinating things in your time in doing it as well. But I know that at the end of the day, they're probably thankful they had a professional like you to help them. Thanks for sharing with us today, Bridget. Appreciate you.
Thank you, James.